On May 17, 1984, at Forbes' Fifth Avenue office in New York City, reporter Jonathan Greenberg took a call from a man named John Barron, who introduced himself as an advisor representing Donald Trump. The goal of Barron was simple but ambitious: to convince the reporter that Donald Trump was far wealthier than he actually was, ensuring that Trump could secure a spot on the prestigious Forbes list.
First of all, most of the assets have been consolidated to Mr. Trump, because you have down Fred Trump, and I'd like to talk to you off the record if I can, just to make your thing easier.
Okay, sure.
Is that all right?
Yeah, that's fine.
All right.
Okay, and would you say, in excess of 90% of the ownership, Emily?
I'd say in excess of 90. In fact, well, it's really closer to even the ultimate, but it's in excess of 90%, yes.
At the time, no one, including Jonathan Greenberg, could have known that he was not actually speaking with Trump's advisor. Years later, it would become clear that the person on the other end of the line was none other than Donald Trump himself. John Barron wasn't just a name, it was a persona designed to bolster Trump's image and create an illusion that would open doors for him that might otherwise have remained closed. Disguised as John Barron, Trump spoke directly to the Forbes reporter, crafting a larger-than-life image of himself. Donald Trump created a fake identity to get himself into positions he didn't really belong in. In the 1970s, Donald Trump gradually took over his father Fred Trump's real estate business. Fred Trump spent decades building and managing more than 27,000 apartments and row houses, primarily in the boroughs of Queens and Brooklyn. At the time, Donald sought more than just a successful business. He aimed to build a reputation that went beyond his father's achievements. From an early age, Donald was already benefiting from his father's wealth. Starting in 1949, Fred Trump began transferring ownership stakes in various properties to Donald and his siblings. With his father's support and the financial backing that came with it, Donald began to set his sights on Manhattan.
Take a look at my next guest. There's a report around Wall Street that this is what he has in mind. This is Donald Trump, 33 years old. And some people think that he wants to buy the World Trade Center. He took his father's rather modest by current standards real estate empire in Brooklyn and expanded it considerably.
And we purchased the old Commodore Hotel, and we've reconverted that now into about $110 million Grand Hyatt Hotel, which is opening up next week in New York City. And we've made some other purchases that have been fun.
When the hotel reopened in 1980, it was widely regarded as a success, symbolizing Donald's emergence as a significant player in Manhattan real estate. In 1982, Jonathan Greenberg, a young reporter for Forbes, got a big job. Help create the first ever Forbes 400 list, ranking the richest people in America. One of his interviews was with Donald Trump. Trump painted a picture of immense success. He claimed that the Trump Organization owned 23,000 nearly debt-free apartments, supposedly worth $900 million. Greenberg had his doubts. Those numbers seemed inflated. But in the end, Trump made it onto the list. Forbes listed him as a rich real estate developer, although with a lower value than he wanted. Shortly after this first assessment, Greenberg received a call from Trump. Trump insisted that his wealth was even greater than Greenberg's estimate and argued that he deserved a higher ranking.
What I think you might want to do is, at some point, maybe after that, before you write your little article, maybe you want to call me again and sit down, because I'd like to discuss a couple of things.
Mm-hmm.
I look at Harris I look at the Forbes from my standpoint as being important. I don't think that you have your facts 100% correct, and I think that's probably somewhat important. So, for instance, you had us down in a certain category, and then you mentioned other names, and there's no contest. There's no contest. So I just wanted to mention that.
In 1983, the situation escalated when Trump enlisted his lawyer, Roy Cohn, to make his case. Cohn called Greenberg.
What do you think of his net worth and how solid?
$750.
What would you base that on?
The Trump Tower has been going like a house of fire, and the profits on that are much higher than had been anticipated. And the same is true with Grand Hyatt. And he files with banks for between 7 to 750 million, as well as with Equitable, which backs him in all of his deals.
Despite Cohen's dramatic claims, he refused to provide documentation, telling Greenberg to trust him. Faced with Cohen's confidence, Greenberg raised Trump's estimated worth again to around $400 million in the Forbes 400. In 1984, Greenberg received an unexpected call from a man named John Barron, who claimed to be a high-ranking executive within the Trump organization. Barron confidently asserted that Trump had taken over 90% of the family business and should now be considered a billionaire.
First of all, most of the assets have been consolidated to Mr. Trump, because you have down Fred Trump. And I'd like to talk to you off the record if I can, just to make your thing easier.
Okay, sure.
Is that all right?
Yeah, that's fine.
All right.
Okay, and would you say, in excess of 90% of the ownership, I believe?
I'd say in excess of 90. In fact, well, it's really closer to even the ultimate, but it's in excess of 90%, yes.
Unbeknownst to Greenberg at the time, Barron was actually Trump himself, using an alter ego to push his narrative. In reality, most of the properties still belonged to Fred Trump at the time. The disguise and confident tone convinced Greenberg, and Trump's estimated worth once again climbed on the list, though his true wealth was likely closer to $5 million. Years passed, and Trump's audacious claims only continued to grow. In 1989, he sent Forbes a letter declaring that his net worth had soared to $3.7 billion, with $900 million in cash alone. But later investigations revealed that Trump's liquid assets amounted to just $19 million, a fraction of the billions he had claimed. Decades later, Greenberg expressed regret, understanding that the estimates and attention they had given to Trump's alleged fortune had built a foundation of credibility that ultimately fueled a far-reaching myth about Trump's wealth and status. Donald Trump used the newfound attention through the Forbes list to solidify his image as an extravagant billionaire. He bought a personalized Boeing 727, which he proudly presented as Trump Force One, complete with golden initials and lavish interior features. This aircraft became a symbol of his seemingly boundless wealth and desire to project an aura of luxury and success. In the early 1990s, Trump faced massive debts, up to $900 million. The losses from his casinos and mismanagement brought him to the brink of bankruptcy. He disappeared from the Forbes list, and his reputation was severely tarnished. The banks that had once been eager to lend to him were now demanding repayment, and Trump found himself in a desperate situation. But he managed to convince Deutsche Bank to grant him loans. In 1998, he secured $125 million in financing for the renovation of a building at 40 Wall Street in New York. Trump continued to use his image to rise again, an image based on exaggerations and deliberate manipulations. His participation in the reality show The Apprentice in 2004 finally helped him make a public comeback.
My name's Donald Trump, and I'm the largest real estate developer in New York. I own buildings all over the place, model agencies, the Miss Universe pageant, jetliners, golf courses, casinos, and private resorts like Mar-a-Lago. I used my brain, I used my negotiating skills, and I worked it all out. Now my company's bigger than it ever was, it's stronger than it ever was, and I'm having more fun than I ever had.
And yet, that lie had opened doors to loans, business opportunities, and ultimately even the presidency of the United States. The recordings revealed the lengths to which Trump was willing to go to create his image, the deception that lay at the heart of his success. The lie had served its purpose, and the myth of Donald Trump, the self-made billionaire, had become deeply ingrained in the public consciousness.